So in India, we constantly think of security in compartments, right? Usually focus on external threats, Pakistan, China, and or internal actors or external non-state actors with support, with or without support from other countries. That's always been the focus here. We never thought of security in a coherent, combined manner. So I'm going to bring out some of the issues as to why we need to do that. When do you open the door? Right? Is it going to be one equipment at a time, one gateway at a time, or is it going to be all? So those kinds of things need to have kind of a contingency plan. Another big complication that you have is huge sets of equipment that is there. They don't talk to each other at all. I alluded that to this a little earlier in my slides. They are completely different equipments. They talk different protocols. They have different kinds of communication methodologies. And the fire department does not talk to health. Health does not talk to the police. Police does not talk to the army. All that is very, very different. The question is, how do you get them to talk to each other? Okay? So, and then they also use different kinds of networks. Some use satellites, some use Wi-Fi, some have wired, some are cell phone based. Question is, how do you bring it all together? That's a huge criteria as well. So, here is yet another complication. Over the last several years, several decades, we've seen the evolution of equipment more and more. And now we are in the 5th generation of equipment dealing with security. In the early 70s or 70s, you had proprietary analog equipment, totally siloed, proprietary, nothing can work with that unless that company does something to you. So they really had you as a prisoner. Then you had dedicated digital devices that can deal with, say, either camera feeds or they can deal with communication, radio communication or whatever. And it improved the quality essentially of what happened in the 70s, but it did not greatly change how the equipment talked to each other. Then you got into the age of standardization. Everything was standardized, things started getting on network, they started sort of working with each other, but then you still had a huge set of other equipment that were lying around, from the past. So you need to create these overlay networks on top of each other to make them work. Then in the last decade, you had sharing resources and so on and so forth in the network. You had all the data go to a central location where it would be stored and it would be analyzed. But and it was using IP and so on and so forth. But still, it lacked the ability to bring things together in a coherent, unified manner. So the 5th generation that we're beginning to see now is how do you virtualize some of these things? For example, can codecs be stored in the cloud? Or do you need to install codecs on the cloud at every location, which is very expensive? How do you get one set of protocols to talk to each other over a common equipment that does automatic layering, translation that happens? Those kinds of things are beginning to do. And there is also a projection of data. So far, security dealt only with receiving data, dealing with it. Now we're dealing with how do you now project some of this data into a way that other people, part of other entities that are part of the security system can absorb and learn, okay, saying, oh my God, something is happening here, how do I deal with it? This is what I've been told that this kind of thing is happening, so I'm going to avoid this and I'm going to take this different route. For example, a router can decide there's congestion happening here, I can go there. Congestion may be, denial of service attack, or it could be anything, right? So based on that, I'm going to make a decision on how to go. Some of it is, done part of security protocols, but there is some decision making that's also being built in intelligently by different solutions. So, if you were to break that up from a requirement perspective, and you look at all the components that will be thrown in, what would that be, right? So it's more like a framework, right? So you're looking at all the technologies that are being thrown in. What would that be? Information security is obviously the most on top of mind, right, for all of us, because that's mostly our bread and butter. So you're looking at encryption, certification, access control, firewalls, and leakage protection, and data visibility control, and so on and so forth. But the market is moving, right? So customers don't just want to get somebody to protect that data, somebody to bring in their video or audio feeds, somebody to bring in an overlay of analytics on top. They want an integrated view, right? So you need to look at how do you develop these kinds of things together in a coherent manner. So the second element is video surveillance. Video surveillance is becoming massively important today in the world. Because, as I was alluding to earlier, terrorists have stopped using email. Terrorists, so they moved on to text messages. They've stopped using text also because they can be intercepted. Now what they do is they pass chits from one place to the other. This is physical security I'm talking about, right? They're passing chits to each other. So because of that, capturing video images of what's happening on the field is absolutely important. What happened in Hyderabad just a week ago or several days ago is becoming key. But video surveillance is not just about gathering data. It is about analytics. How do you tag? Right now, a simplistic tagging is to put the dates and timestamp on a particular event that happened. But it's much beyond that, right? So you need to have analytics brought in so that you can triangulate an object. Let's say there are 4 video cameras that are there at different locations, and they've caught subject A, B, and imagine a position where the analytics can catch it and then have a forwarding information to the cameras in the same trajectory of what this person is going on or in the areas over there to look for this individual, a high value suspect. So you captured an event, an individual, you captured an individual and you let the other equipment know, but have you let the people dealing with security in those areas know? Sending them text or visual photographs on their computers or on their smartphones, text messages, radio feeds saying that so and so is is expected to be there. Those kinds of things are becoming very important as well, coming out of the video surveillance. Outdoor wireless is becoming very popular, right? More and more. You'll find hotspots all over the place. There are public hotspots and then there are private hotspots as well. And that is becoming huge ways to capture, especially because a wireless camera doesn't need to be laid. I mean, you don't need to have wires running all over the place that can be cut. And it can be placed somewhere in an unseen position and it can keep transmitting data back to a central location. That's huge. Tracking resources. Resources can be anything from a police officer to a car to a dog, security dog that is there to figure out where these resources are. That is becoming crucial as well. Also good for communication, of course. It's very obvious. And to set up ad hoc command centers. So that's an incident that happens, or let's say there is a security threat or a safety issue that has happened. You can drive a truck there and set up a command center and create a Wi-Fi span around an area. Okay, that is also becoming very, very important. Especially the current implementation is mostly deal with the mass congregation and safety aspects, but it is getting more and more into security as well. Sensors is the huge new wave that is beginning to happen. Sensors at the borders, sensors at entrances at various points, sensors in objects, to catch movement, capture a particular piece of data, capturing changes in the environment, and how do you bring that back so that it can trigger an alarm. Telepresence or high-end video control, to have a collaboration set up between those in the command center, those at on the field, officers that are managing this entire security system. How can they have a report out that is done, meetings that are happening. So that is a very important element that is coming up as well. Communications, you pick up a phone, you can pick up any phone, right? Any device. It could be
your own cell phone, it could be a phone desk that is connected to a wire, or it could be online chat. How do you unify all of them and provide a simplistic view to somebody, to everybody who is participating in the network? That is key. Physical access management, now in India and many other countries, it's always a security guard standing there with a uniform, with a lathi or with a gun, right? So you're looking at getting smart card. Smart card is not just about getting a card and flashing it somewhere. Smart card, the way it's got to evolve is that you will be able to track this card, the person who's carrying it all the time, everywhere. It's not passive, based on what it is. So, and it's based on also biometric, which this card will expire over a period of time, and you'll have to do something to this card to make it alive, to confirm that you are who you are. So somebody steals your card and walks away, so it'll expire in a period of time and it'll automatically expire. So this person has to revalidate it, otherwise you'll know that this person is not legit. The response management and decision support system, these are large systems that need to be built on top of a security system. So and it's usually very customized. There are several frameworks available in the world, but nothing that is robust enough that can handle the large kind of volumes that you see in populous nations like India. So if you were to crystallize that and put it into an architecture, security architecture, what does that look like? So I've divided that into 3 buckets, right? So I'm not saying that this is Cisco's view, it is probably not. And a lot of people in Cisco will argue with me that they need to change it, but this is my view of what security architecture needs to look like. So there are 3 buckets that I put it in. One is the acquisition bucket. Third is protection, how do you protect things? And third is the management aspect of it. Acquisitions, very straightforward, right? How do you get data? How do you get people at the very first point of contact from outside or from inside? How do you catch a particular data coming in? That is your acquisition module. And the consumers of that, or the users of these things, will be your security guards, right? Officers on the ground, or it could be virtual officers as well. They could be robots. So think of this. Think of it as this way: you have network robots who go around the network, figuring out if there's any untoward activity happening in the network, evaluating every router as such. Today, the whole networking protocol, the way it's done, it's all self-driven. I say what is going to happen. Imagine if there's a free-flowing thing that goes around and checks every aspect. Right now, it's done from up there, right? So there's a different element that sits there and goes and checks everything. Imagine if something is in the system. Second is a protection element, where how do you protect the data that you have? You captured all the data, you spent a lot of money capturing it. How do you make sure that it is not leaked, it is not lost, it's not modified? How do you protect it? What kind of encryption are you going to use? How, the encryption rules, your keys, your certificates, all that has to be controlled. Your access control mapping, your digit matrix, all of that needs to be protected in a point where it cannot be accessed. Leakage protection is huge issue. So if you go to many say high security campuses in many parts of the world, you're asked to turn in your cell phone, your wallets, and your laptops and everything, but you can't take a USB in your shoe, right? You don't need to be. It doesn't even need to be in the heel of your shoe. It can be between the sole of your feet. You can just shove it in there, and nobody's going to check you, right? Have you noticed that? So people can walk in, and all you need is one collaborator inside the system for you to either inject malware or to access data that they should not access and give it to you. The whole premise of security today is like a fort. You keep the bad guys out, and the guys inside are good. Is that accurate anymore? Is that valid anymore? I don't think so, right? So you don't know who's inside, who's outside. You need to make sure that people inside are also checked, and they're not necessarily treated as bad guys, but treated with a degree of healthy suspicion, right? To make sure that the guys inside are not compromised as well. So that's the degree of protection that needs to go in there. And usually the consumers or the users of the protection element will be your command center, the guys who are watching the screens, who are looking at computer screens, watching digital feeds that are happening, looking into incident reports or event triggers that happen to flag certain things one way or the other. So that's basically where that block goes in. The third block is the management block. The management block is probably the most important and most complex because it is so individualized, it is so customized to each security system, and it varies immensely. And the important thing there is, how do you track the information? I'm not going to get into all these blocks over here, but how do you track the information? So let's say you notice there is an authentication breach somewhere. How do you track where it came from? And when do you catch it? Because, if it is from an IP address that is there, as you know, the IP address and the identity of the person is not necessarily linked, right? So once you get authenticated, you get an IP address, the identity of the person goes away. And how do you go back and track and say, who got this IP address at that particular point in time, right? That is very, very key. And not many tools available today to help you uniformly, so especially if you don't control where they're coming from. The other thing is, let's say you have equipment putting in there and you have these innocuous pings happening on particular ports, right? Ping 70, 120, 180, 30, right? 80. And suddenly the box behaves differently. Is it possible? Imagine then, in protocol packets that I'm getting, these reserve bits are there, and suddenly one reserve bit is turned on, and suddenly the box behaves differently. Is it possible? How are you going to track it? How are you going to, control what is there? So those kinds of things. That's why I was saying that this concept of the bad guys outside and everybody inside is kosher and is good is not valid anymore. So you need to look at how you need to do it. Okay, so this is the sleight of hand I was talking about. So I've changed those to 6 steps to respond. So first is, of course, the preparation to prevent, right? So prevention is better than cure. So you want to prepare enough things to make sure that you prevent an incident from happening. That is the whole purpose of any security system. If you can prevent it, great. Now, if you can't prevent it, and then there is incident does happen, and there is some sensor or some kind of an event that captures it, and then you notify to some kind of an authority. Question is, they need to assess it and say, okay, this is what is going to happen on that for this particular event, and do I need to make it an incident or not? Once that happens, then a decision needs to be made at the command center that can then figure out what is my response going to be. And once you actually done this response, then you need to have a recovery. So the example that I gave you, camera focusing on a door. So it's feeding in data. When there's no activity, nothing comes out, right, from the camera. Suddenly somebody walks in and comes out. Boom, there's an event that is raised. Command center looks at it and says, is somebody supposed to go in at 2 o'clock in the morning to this building? No. Okay, so what do I need to do? I need to have a response. So I can choose to shut down access entries to everything else, shut down the building, notify my various people on the ground to go attend to this particular event. I can even provide data to that person. What is the color of the shirt this person wearing? Where did this person come from? Go look at the video feed and say, where is this person coming from? And give all that information to the person who's going there so they can have a meaningful engagement with this person. If it just was a scientist or some engineer, middle of the night had a brainwave and had to go work on something, that's not necessarily a bad guy, right? But you need to be careful about how you need to deal with that. Finally is, how do you recover? Okay, so you notice that this is a pattern of what happens. So could it have been correlated to this person, the scientist, having entered the system at a particular point in time and knowing that this is where this person walked? So it's not really a threat. So those kinds of recovery, post-mortem analysis could be done. I'm going to I'll gloss over this slide very quickly. So if I were to take these 6 steps and then break it, there's really only 3 steps, right? Detection, assessment, response. Detecting multiple incidents that happen across multiple different ways of accessing it. How do you assess it? And finally, quickly, how do you respond it? The response factor is becoming the more complex factor here because the number of elements that are there on the right hand side, my right hand side, your right hand side too. How many elements that are there, and how do you deal with all of them? And they're all talking different languages. How do you quickly respond? We feel that network is the platform that you can deliver. So here I'm going to walk you through a specific use case in a campus, in a college, for example. Let's say there is this person, a university student, who's sitting there, who's working, and then there is a suspicious person. Let's call him Lech IM, and Lech IM is following the university student. She gets very nervous. She goes and calls the police. She could call from a phone or handheld. She could text. She could go to a physical box, call, whatever, right? So she reaches a command center and lets them know that I'm being followed by this person. I'm not sure what this person is going to be. So the camera feed, what happens is captures. So based on the description of what this lady is telling the command center, they can quickly do an analysis of various video feeds based on where she is and the locality, based on identifiers, color of the shirt, how tall this individual is, do an analytic scan and identify video grabs of various things and be able to either show the video or the photograph to various people, and it could be transmitted either to somebody driving a car with a laptop, as in the Western cases, or in radio in places like India, right? So you just say, so-and-so is walking in with a red shirt, go find, in this particular place, seems appropriate, go find out. Those kinds of communication needs to go out. What can also happening, and this is what I was talking about before, is that you can shut down exit points. In most places in India, and I could never figure that out 8 years ago, as to why you need to flash your card to leave a building. In the US and many developed nations, you flash a card to enter a building, but when you exit, it's always, okay, so you're a good guy, you're leaving. Right? In India, it's always about flashing the card even after you're leaving. Then, over a period of time, I came to the realization, okay, actually, it's not a bad idea. Because you can actually stop people who don't have a badge to leave. You can actually lock it down. I know that in India, they did it for a different reason, to see when employees come in and go out. But, it has ancillary benefits as well. You can lock down buildings. The other thing that you can do is you can send out digital messages. You can put it out saying, security alert in this building, do not go there without friends, go in groups, lighted, or avoid this building, go to a different area. Those kinds of video messages. It can also be sent as text messages and SMSs or phone calls or MMS kind of messages as well, and alerts to appropriate people. So this is one use case of how different pieces of the network can come together to provide a campus security, and I tried to give you different examples, and I could keep going on for a long time. But I want to leave you, I want to leave enough time if there are any questions to talk as well, so it's not just a monologue. I want to leave you with some important pointers, especially those who are working in security domain in India. Most of the work that is being done in India follows a Western script. Those requirements are really not very valid for the Indian context. The Indian context, the main important thing, the burning platform issue is border control, coastline control, safety of people, and security within large populations. That is the main requirement of countries like, say, India, China, Brazil, and South Africa and other places, right? So think about it from that perspective. Second is, don't look at security as just element security or network security or a component security. No. Look at it a much larger way. So if you think of it in a much larger scope, the ability for you to innovate, ability for you to look at how do you address these kinds of concerns are going to be huge. Third thing I would say is that we are at the cusp of a new wave of how do you deal with security. International terrorism is only going to increase focus on security in the world. and the security emphasis is going to be higher. So the opportunity to innovate for these markets from here is huge, and it will have a huge relevance for the rest of the world. Okay, thank you so much.